What's going on, everyone? Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets have quite the rocky relationship, to put it nicely. Kyrie Irving has been very inconsistent for the Brooklyn Nets, and the Brooklyn Nets feel very slighted. They feel like they can't trust in Kyrie Irving, and he isn't doing the job that is necessary. And it looks like Kyrie Irving's time with the Brooklyn Nets may very well be coming to an end. So much so that it is being reported by Shams that contract negotiations have basically halted, and neither side have been able to resolve this problem on getting Kyrie Irving to come back to the Brooklyn Nets. And the Brooklyn Nets have expressed, there have been reports for months now that Brooklyn is pretty much done with Kyrie Irving and they don't want to pay him for the long haul. And Kyrie Irving hasn't opted in, and it looks like Kyrie Irving may test free agency. And the places that seem to want Kyrie Irving are the New York Knicks and the two LA teams, the Clippers and the Lakers. And now, whatever ends up happening with Kyrie Irving, the one thing we can say for sure is it's going to be unpredictable, right? Kyrie Irving is one of those players that you never know what he's going to do. He's one of the few players in the NBA that you think the smart or logical or typical route is this direction, and then he takes a sharp left, and you're like, okay, I did not see that coming. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up on one of these teams, but there's definitely going to be some hurdles and obstacles, especially for the LA teams. And that's something I want to dive into in this video, is these two teams. Because the LA teams, it's nearly impossible for either of the teams to actually obtain him. And the Knicks make a lot of sense. And I've even done a video on the New York Knicks. I'll link that video down in the description below. I highly recommend you check it out after this video. But jumping right into it, the first team we'll stick with is the Clippers. Now, the Clippers, from a logical standpoint, doesn't make a ton of sense for Kyrie Irving. Because the beauty of the Clippers is they have so much depth and so much chemistry with Ty Lue, who has really drawn out the best in these guys. And then Paul George and Kawhi Leonard added to the mix. I just think they're arguably the best team in the entire league next season if everyone is healthy. And you're going to throw a wrench that is Kyrie Irving into the mix. I don't know if that would be a good option for the Clippers. You're likely going to lose a good chunk of your depth, which is not good, especially in this league, especially come playoff time. The Clippers were a solid team without PG and Kawhi. I only imagine that those two coming back are going to just elevate them to another level. Not just that, but the Clippers with Kyrie Irving, now you have three guys and no real facilitator, because you got to imagine you're probably going to lose Reggie Jackson, and you don't have necessarily a true point guard. And Kyrie Irving is more of a shooting guard than he is a point guard. Now, don't get me wrong, on paper, this team would be absolutely incredible. But are you really going to trade your depth, end up being hard capped, so you can't really add anything else? Which, the Clippers could trade enough to where they still have what they need and have the best roster in the NBA. So I don't think the Clippers would be too hard capped, if that makes sense. They would be hard capped in the sense of financially, but as far as the team goes, I think that they would be in a good spot still. But the problem is that I feel like it could be very clunky. Because right off the bat, Kawhi Leonard has never averaged 5 assists for his entire career. And you're talking a guy that is essentially a black hole in many ways when it comes to the basketball sticking to his hands. Paul George is a much more willing passer, and he has improved in that department over the years and has really kind of elevated his passing and distribution very heavily. But he's still not a point guard, right? He's not that kind of guy. And Kyrie isn't either. And then on top of all the locker room stuff and just, the lack of consistency, which Kawhi and Paul George have been very inconsistent, not because they just don't want to play basketball, but because, injuries and such. I just don't think it's a good idea for the Clippers. If I'm the Clippers, I want to stay as far away from Kyrie Irving as possible. Now, these are just reports, so it's very likely that this is all just smoke and mirrors. But if I'm the Clippers, I'm the last one that wants Kyrie Irving. I'm probably already the best team in the NBA. I'm probably in the greatest position to win a championship next year, assuming health is all good and go. Then why would I want to add Kyrie Irving, who doesn't really fit what you got going on? And I do understand Ty Lue was the coach that won with Kyrie Irving. So the thinking and logic is like, oh, they have that connection there. But still, like, I just don't think from a roster and just chemistry and just player standpoint, Kyrie Irving makes a ton of sense on the Clippers. But moving on to the Lakers. Now, Lakers, I think, make a ton of sense. I think they really do. First off, Kyrie Irving and LeBron James have won a championship. They both have spoke extremely highly of each other lately, very publicly, and talked about, missed opportunities, things like that. The Lakers and the Nets met. Sean Marks went to the Lakers and talked to them about potentially trading for Kyrie Irving. And so right then and there, that shows a lot. That shows that there's something there. And usually when there's smoke, there's fire. And a team with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Kyrie Irving is a smooth and perfect fit. I mean, that's about as good of a fit as it goes. I mean, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving won an NBA championship with Kevin Love. Imagine what they could do with Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is a huge upgraded, Kevin Love. And not just that, LeBron is at the point in his career where it would be nice for him to just facilitate. He doesn't have to exert as much energy, as much as, LeBron's wanted to play off the ball, and the Lakers organization has tried to make that happen. It's clear that LeBron is best with the ball in his hands. Kyrie and LeBron already fit beautifully, and it's a perfect fit. And beyond fit, it's also good for both organizations because both organizations have a issue with a particular player, right? You have Kyrie Irving and you have Russell Westbrook, right? And so you could do a flip and a flop for that to work. Brooklyn would probably have to give up something else. I'm sure there'd be other pieces exchanged. But again, it's very hard to facilitate a trade because the Lakers would be hard capped. And unlike the Clippers, the Lakers don't have the depth and pieces around the team to be able to go and get a bunch of prospects. However, you could, you get a couple second round draft picks, which they have money for. There's ways that they could go about it, but it just makes things very difficult. And I do think Kyrie, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James is enough of a big three to win you a championship. But there's still a lot of issues with Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, LeBron James' health, consistency, things along those lines. I don't think the fit would be an issue. I think when the three of them are on the court together, I think it would be just, music in motion. But with the trade, the Lakers would have Kyrie Irving's $36.6 million incoming salary. And so for the Lakers to stay within the collective bargaining agreement, they would either have to send somewhere between $29.3 million and $45.8 million to the Brooklyn Nets. So that's why I'm saying is that very likely there's going to be multiple parts, multiple pieces exchanged. But another approach, because there are several options as far as like him getting to the Lakers. Number one would be a 3-team deal. Right, there was talks of the Indiana Pacers, Charlotte Hornets, teams like that wanting Westbrook. So you could send Westbrook to that team. Maybe, whatever pieces they were going to trade to the Lakers for Westbrook, they trade to the Nets if the Nets would want that. And then the Nets end up sending Kyrie Irving to the Lakers. The Lakers, send a draft pick or something like that to the Nets as like a thank you. And then you can make it work that route. The other option would be if the Lakers are willing to sign Kyrie long term, maybe Kyrie comes in at like the mid-level exception, which, would be unbelievable because it's only $6 million. But if he's a free agent, it can happen. And here's the thing about Kyrie, and I'm not saying this will happen. I'm not saying that, Kyrie should do this, but you can't argue that Kyrie is the type of player that would do that just out of spite, and just say, what, I'm done. Like, you guys don't want to pay me, fine. I'll go play with the Lakers. The Lakers will go win a championship, all of that stuff, and he could sign on for the mid-level exception, and they're good. That is a real possibility when you're talking Kyrie Irving. If you're talking any other player in the league, I don't think that would happen in a million years. Kyrie Irving, I really do believe, is the type of player who would just go to the Lakers and sign for the mid-level just to, prove a point and show a principle. Like, look at what I'm doing. Yeah, you see, like, he just seems like that guy that would do such a thing. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not even saying the Lakers should necessarily do the trade, just because, again, they'd be hard capped, and they'd be hard capped not in a way that the Clippers would be hard capped. But moving on from the Lakers is Kyrie Irving and the New York Knicks. Now, the New York Knicks make the most sense. And this ties into the video that I mentioned earlier, which, again, is linked down in the description below. New York could realistically get Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Now, Kyrie Irving could sign outright with the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets could actually, work some trade, work some deal out, something along those lines. I think Kyrie Irving to the New York Knicks makes a ton of sense. I think New York would jump at the opportunity to sign Kyrie Irving just for that star power to put butts in seats. It sounds like, something that the Knicks would do. And I know that there's new regimes, they have new plans in place, all of those things, but the Knicks got to make a push at some point. When I made the previous video, I saw every possible, Knick theory that's out there. And at the end of the day, the Knicks haven't been a legit contender in 30 plus years. I know the Carmelo Anthony days and stuff like that. On paper, it looked good, but that team was not very good. They never even got out of the second round. Amari Stoudemire was not the same guy. Carmelo Anthony, in many ways, wasn't the same guy. Tyson Chandler was not the same guy. Like, that team wasn't a legit contender. Nobody was really worried about the Knicks back then. You go get Kyrie Irving, then Kyrie Irving likely leads you to Kevin Durant. Because the whole reason Kevin Durant went to the Brooklyn Nets was to play with Kyrie Irving. On top of that, Kevin Durant himself said he wanted to go to the Knicks. Originally, that was his plan, was to go to the Knicks. So he already wanted to be with the Knicks, but the only reason he went to Brooklyn was because Kyrie wanted to go home. And so they were able to make it work, and he was able to go to the Brooklyn Nets. Well, Kyrie Irving could just sign with the Knicks, and then the Knicks could trade whatever they need to trade to go get Kevin Durant, and they'd still likely have pieces, or they'd have more, flexibility, stuff like that. I just think that if you're New York, you got to get both of these guys. Like, if that window and opportunity is there, I think you do. If it's just Kyrie Irving, I guess you could say it'd be a bit of a gamble. You bring Kyrie on in the hopes that maybe Kevin Durant wants to come with him, or maybe Kyrie kind of gives you the nudge, the hint, wink, wink. Like, hey, if you get me, Kevin Durant will come with you too. I just think if you're just getting Kyrie Irving, if you're the New York Knicks, I wouldn't do it. Because Kyrie isn't going to make you a contender. And Kyrie Irving, you got to deal with the headaches. You got to deal with everything that goes into Kyrie Irving. And I just don't think Kyrie plus what you have is a good enough team. But if you can get Kevin Durant along with that, then I think it makes a ton of sense. And you're in a great position. And now you are a legit contender. Plus, you have pieces around you. Plus, you could probably go get a couple other pieces. I just think New York makes the most sense from like a financial standpoint. I do think the Lakers make the most sense from like a personnel standpoint, player standpoint, things like that. I also think Kyrie might be most happiest in LA. But I think if you're thinking about New York as far as like a Kyrie landing spot, I think that that's the only way. If I'm New York, I would do that. Like, if I'm guaranteed Kevin Durant, then I'm good. Like, if Kevin Durant goes to the Brooklyn Nets and says, I only came here because of Kyrie Irving, you guys let go of Kyrie Irving, he's on the Knicks now, I want to be traded, and I'm not going to any other team but the Knicks. Like, now the Brooklyn Nets have no choice. But I mean, the Brooklyn Nets would likely get some pieces. You probably got to trade at least RJ Barrett, which I know Knicks fans would hate, but Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving for RJ Barrett essentially is about as good of a deal as it gets. You do that all day. RJ Barrett is a nice player, but is he winning you a championship? Maybe, but there's no way to predict that. He's not some, Jason Tatum who's just lighting it up the first 2 years in the league. Like, he has his moments, he has his sparks, but he's also had a lot of dead moments where it just looks like he's just another player. Like, so I just don't see him, like, he's not Luka, so are you really putting all your chips into RJ? I don't think so. I think if you have an opportunity to get Kyrie and KD, you do that. So Brooklyn likely gets RJ, maybe Randall, and a couple other things, maybe like an Alec Burke or something along those lines. And then, you get Kevin Durant. I think that that's a fair trade. You sign Kyrie Irving. I just think that's about as good of a spot as the Knicks could be in. I think it would be great for them to do that. But realistically, I think if I had to guess, out of these three, like let's say he's gone from the Nets and it comes down to these three teams, I think ultimately he goes to the Lakers because I think that the Los Angeles Clippers make no sense from a Clipper standpoint. I think New York, it makes no sense unless you get Kevin Durant. But how do you guarantee you get Kevin Durant unless Kevin Durant is on board, tells the Brooklyn Nets? I mean, there's just a lot of things that have to fall into place for that. I think the Lakers are the most realistic destination for Kyrie Irving. I think that the Lakers organization would make the trade even though they'd be hard capped just to get Kyrie Irving to try to win a championship because I think that they would look at it as like, Kyrie, LeBron, and Anthony Davis, those three together, were the best team in the NBA. Not just that, Lakers have always been about the star power, and Kyrie Irving, however you feel about him, he's still a star. He's still a tremendous player. He's incredible. So I just think from all the options, I think the Lakers make the most sense. I think the Lakers, one, are desperate enough in many ways to go make that trade. I think it makes the most sense from a fit standpoint. I think it makes the most sense from a LeBron standpoint. I think it makes the most sense from a Brooklyn Nets standpoint because you get off of Kyrie Irving, you get some pieces. Not just that, but Kevin Durant. I know many people look at it and go, Kevin Durant would never play with Russell Westbrook again, but none of us know that. Last we heard, they reconciled and they were good. And the issue that the Nets have, which Kevin Durant, he has to have some of that same issues, is Kyrie Irving not showing up and not being consistent. The one thing Russell Westbrook is consistent. The one thing you get out of Russell Westbrook is that will and drive to play. Unlike Kyrie Irving, you've never heard Russell Westbrook say, I could retire today and it wouldn't matter. Like Russell Westbrook is everything the Brooklyn Nets have wanted. So I think at the end of the day, I think letting go of Kyrie Irving for Russell Westbrook isn't a terrible idea for the Brooklyn Nets. It might be a little clunky. It might be a little awkward because you got Ben Simmons, but maybe they can figure it out. I mean, the Oklahoma City Thunder had Russell Westbrook and they had, Kevin Durant, and they had some clunky pieces. I mean, yeah, they had like Serge Ibaka and stuff like that, but yeah, you had like Steven Adams, guys like that. Russell Westbrook has played with centers. The problem with the Lakers is that nobody on the Lakers could shoot. At least Brooklyn has a lot of really good shooters. Joe Harris, Seth Curry, Patty Mills, Kevin Durant. You have enough guys to put around Westbrook to be effective. And worst case scenario, his contract's off the books at the end of the year, and you could go get maybe like a Bradley Beal or something like that to pair with Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons. I just think it's a good spot to be in if you're Brooklyn. I don't think it's the end of the world. You eat it for a year. Whatever happens, happens. Kevin Durant, hopefully you can get him to buy in. Like, hey, I know Westbrook isn't the greatest option, but it's something for now. There aren't really any other choices at the moment. You play with him for a year, it's off the books, and now you can pick your star. I think that's something that could be a real possibility. But as always, this is a discussion, so I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think of Kyrie Irving leaving the Brooklyn Nets? What do you think about him testing free agency? What do you think about, which team he's going to play for? Do you think he goes to one of the LA teams? Do you think he goes to the Knicks? Do you think he goes to another team? If you think it's another team, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section. Let me know which team you think he goes to. And what do you want to see from Kyrie Irving? And what do you think of this as a whole? Look, I respect Kyrie Irving's decision with the whole vax thing and everything like that. I don't hold that against him. I really don't. We all are entitled to make our decisions and what we put in our bodies and stuff like that. That's never been my issue. But even if you remove that, Kyrie Irving has a history of issues. He has a history of things that he has came out and said. And I'm not even talking about the flat earther stuff and all that, because I know somebody's going to be like, oh, who cares what his beliefs are? I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the stuff he's talked about when it comes to basketball. This is the same guy that's talked about him like he would retire tomorrow, like that he doesn't care about basketball and that there are bigger things, things, and which is not wrong. But, you get paid millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to play the game of basketball. And he seems more in other places than he does on the basketball court. So, I mean, it's just there's a lot that goes into Kyrie Irving. But a guy like LeBron James, who understands him, who's been there, he knows him. They've talked very highly of each other lately. All of those things. I think the Lakers are about as good of a fit for Kyrie Irving as it gets. But again, love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.